You're sitting in a bunker 60 feet below a government building in Tel Aviv. The air smells like recycled oxygen and old coffee. On the screen in front of you are 72 targeting coordinates. Not buildings, not cities, centrifuge halls, uranium enrichment facilities. Underground hardened sites buried under 80 meters of reinforced concrete in the Zagros Mountains. You've wargamed this 214 times. The simulation gives you a 68% probability of meaningful setback to Iran's nuclear program, and a 94% probability of what the analysts call regional escalation cascade. You know what that means. Everyone in this room knows what that means. But you've been asked to prepare the plan, so you prepare the plan. This is the kind of decision that doesn't get made cleanly. It doesn't get made by one person in one room on one day. It gets made in increments across months, across failed diplomacy, across red lines crossed and not enforced, until one morning the question shifts from if to when, and when becomes now. If you've ever wondered how the world edges toward the kind of war that changes everything, keep watching, because this is how it works. Iran's nuclear program isn't new. It's been the defining strategic threat of the Middle East for over 2 decades. The Natanz facility went public in 2002. The Fordow site, buried under a mountain near Qom, was revealed in 2009, after it had already been operating in secret. The JCPOA, the 2015 nuclear deal, bought time. Then the United States pulled out in 2018, and Iran began enriching uranium at levels no civilian energy program needs. As of early 2025, Iran is enriching uranium to 60% purity at Fordow and Natanz. Weapons grade is 90%. The gap between those two numbers is not years, it's weeks. In some estimates, it's days. That's the world you're planning inside of. Israel has approximately 90 nuclear warheads it officially doesn't acknowledge. It has F-35 Ayadir stealth fighter jets, the most advanced in the Israeli Air Force. And a fleet of F-15 is capable of carrying the GBU-28 bunker buster bomb, a 5,000-pound laser-guided penetrator designed specifically to destroy underground hardened facilities. The problem isn't capability. The problem is distance. Natanz is 1,600 kilometers from Israeli airspace. Fordow is 1,700. That requires aerial refueling, which requires flight path coordination, which means Saudi airspace or Jordanian airspace, or both. And that means diplomatic pressure that doesn't stay quiet. Nothing about this stays quiet. You know that going in. You've always known that. The plan, as you've modeled it, doesn't start with bombs. It starts with electronic warfare packages deployed 72 hours before the first strike, Iranian air defense radar networks. The Bavar 373 system, their domestically produced S-300 equivalent, get hit with spoofing signals that make their screens show empty sky. At the same time, cyber units already embedded in Iranian grid infrastructure are activated, not to crash the grid, not yet, just to create latency, confusion, a 12-second delay in command and control response times. 12 seconds is an eternity when you're trying to scramble interceptor jets. Then the F-35 has crossed the border at 45,000 feet, below radar detection thresholds, in formation patterns that look, to the Iranian systems that are still functioning, like commercial air traffic anomalies. They're carrying the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator. Each one weighs 30,000 pounds. Each one is designed to burrow 60 meters through reinforced earth before detonating. Fordow, the hardest target, sits under approximately 80 meters of mountain. You need 2 sequential strikes on the exact same coordinates. The first to breach, the second to destroy. The timing window between them is 11 seconds. You've practiced this. Your pilots have practiced this. In simulation, the success rate is 71%. In real air, with real Iranian anti-aircraft units that aren't confused by a simulation, you don't know what it is. Nobody does. That's the part they don't put in the briefing slides. The strikes happen fast. The first wave. Natanz, Fordow, Isfahan's uranium conversion facility, the Arak heavy water reactor, takes approximately 90 minutes from border crossing to weapons away. You lose 2 aircraft. The pilots eject over Iraqi airspace and are recovered within 6 hours. Iran's nuclear program is set back. By how much is disputed immediately, even inside your own intelligence community. Some say 2 years, some say 5. One analyst in the corner of the room, the one who never gets invited to the good meetings, says 18 months. He might be right. That's the problem. You don't hit a nuclear program and declare victory. You hit it and start a clock. Because Iran doesn't need to rebuild Fordo to retaliate. They don't need centrifuges spinning to make your next 10 years a catastrophe. Within 6 hours of the first strike, Hezbollah, which maintains an arsenal of approximately 150,000 rockets and missiles in southern Lebanon, the largest non-state weapons stockpile in human history, begins firing. Not the precision-guided munitions. Not yet. First come the unguided Katyushas, thousands of them, in saturation barrages designed to overwhelm Iron Dome by sheer volume. Iron Dome has an interception rate of roughly 90% against rockets in its engagement envelope. When 3,000 rockets are fired in 4 hours, 10% means 300 impacts. Haifa takes 40 hits in the first hour. Tel Aviv suburbs take 80 in the first 3. Ben Gurion Airport closes. The stock market, which had already been pricing in war risk for 6 weeks, drops 22% at open before trading is suspended. In Gaza, whatever ceasefire framework existed, fragile, contested, never fully holding, collapses entirely within 24 hours. Palestinian Islamic Jihad, separately funded by Iran, launches every rocket it has. In Yemen, the Houthis, who have been practicing drone and missile strikes on Red Sea shipping for over a year, fire a salvo of 16 Shahed 136 drones at Israeli territory. 3 get through. 1 hits a logistics facility near Eilat. In Iraq, Iranian-backed militia groups attack the American military base at al-Assad with rocket-assisted artillery. 2 American soldiers are wounded. Now the United States is involved whether it wanted to be or not. And the Strait of Hormuz. That's the number that keeps every energy minister in Europe and every futures trader in New York awake at night. 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. Approximately 21% of global oil supply passes through it daily. About 21 million barrels. Iran has mines. Iran has fast attack boats. Iran has anti-ship missiles positioned on islands in the Persian Gulf. They don't need to close the strait permanently to destroy the global economy. They just need to close it for 11 days. Oil goes from $83 a barrel to $160 in the first 72 hours of strait closure. Shipping insurance rates become effectively prohibitive for the next 60 days, regardless of what happens militarily. Global inflation, which had been cooling, spikes again. Germany, which runs manufacturing dependent on Middle Eastern supply chains, enters recession within a quarter. China, which imports 40% of its oil through the strait, faces a choice between strategic reserve drawdowns and political crisis at home. You modeled all of this. The economic disruption module in your war game is 400 pages long. You read 40 of them. The conclusion was the same on page 40 as it would have been on page 1. There is no version of this that doesn't hurt everyone. But here's what the analysts can't model, what doesn't fit into a simulation, what gets called second-order effects in the briefing room, and what the hell did we just do everywhere else. Iran's domestic political landscape after a strike is not what it was before. The Iranian government, which had for years faced genuine internal pressure from a population exhausted by sanctions, by economic collapse, by the events of 2019 and 2022, is suddenly unified. The strikes don't weaken the regime. They hand the regime the one thing it has never been able to manufacture domestically: legitimacy. Every Iranian who had a complicated relationship with the Islamic Republic wakes up the morning after the strike and feels something ancient and involuntary. They feel their country was attacked. The reformists, the protesters, the people who burned Khamenei's portrait 2 years ago, they're not pro-regime, but they are in this moment Iranian, and that is enough. The IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which controls not just Iran's military, but its economy, its construction sector, its telecommunications, its energy infrastructure, now has unlimited operational authority and unlimited popular cover. The moderates inside the Iranian political system who had been arguing for negotiation, for re-engagement, for some version of diplomacy that could hold, they are gone. Not physically gone, politically irrelevant. In their place, the hardliners who have always wanted this war, who have spent 40 years building toward exactly this confrontation, have everything they need to accelerate Iran's nuclear program into the one place it cannot be reached by any conventional munition on Earth. Full dispersal, fully distributed, fully secret, rebuilt inside civilian infrastructure, inside hospitals, inside mosques, inside the kind of target no democratic military can strike without becoming the villain of its own story. You stopped Iran from having a bomb for 18 months. You gave Iran the motivation to build 12. The United States, 3 days after the strike, issues a statement calling for de-escalation while simultaneously deploying 2 additional carrier strike groups to the Persian Gulf. The USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS Theodore Roosevelt, each with their own air wings, their own destroyers, their own submarine escorts, are now in range of everything. Iran sees this not as deterrence, Iran sees this as preparation for Phase 2. Iran begins moving mobile ballistic missile launchers, the Shahab-3, the EMAD, the Ghadar variants, out of known storage facilities into populated urban areas. Because they've studied American rules of engagement, they know exactly which targets American commanders won't hit. American casualties from the al-Assad attack become a domestic political event within 48 hours. The president is on television. The language is careful, measured, escalation aware. And it doesn't matter because the question being asked in every living room in America is the same question that gets asked at the start of every war that turns out to be longer than anyone wanted. Are we in this now? Are we actually in this? Congress is not in session. It's a recess week. The War Powers Resolution gives the president 60 days of unilateral military action before requiring congressional authorization. 60 days is a long time when missiles are flying. 60 days is no time at all when you're trying to build a coalition that holds. Russia, which has been selling Iran drone technology for 2 years and has its own complicated relationship with Middle Eastern stability, calls for an emergency UN Security Council session. It vetoes every resolution. China abstains from the first, vetoes the second. The Security Council, which was already functionally paralyzed, becomes theater. The real negotiating happens in back channels. Qatar, Oman, Turkey, through intermediaries who have no formal authority but real access. Qatar hosts both a U.S. military base and Hamas's political office. It has been a go-between before. It will try to be again, but go-betweens need both sides to want a door. Right now, both sides need to look strong before they can afford to look willing. 3 weeks in, the casualty count is, in the context of modern wars, relatively low, fewer than 400 dead across all parties. Compared to what everyone feared, it almost feels controlled. That feeling is dangerous, because what's happening in the 3 weeks isn't the war, it's the posturing before both sides decide how far they actually want to go. That decision hasn't been made yet. It gets made in week 4 when a precision Iranian EMAD missile, GPS-guided, not one of the unguided Katyushas, hits a building in Tel Aviv's Ramat Aviv neighborhood at 2:14 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. 41 people die. 17 of them are children because the building has a school on its 3rd floor. That's the moment everything changes. Not the first strike, not the straight closure, not the al-Assad attack. This, a specific Tuesday afternoon. 41 names. That's when the Israeli cabinet authorizes targets that had previously been marked off limits. Not nuclear, not yet, but Iranian military command infrastructure, IRGC headquarters in Tehran, the Imam Ali military complex, targets that, until now, were red lines because hitting them meant hitting the heart of the regime, not its periphery. Hitting them means you're not trying to set back a nuclear program anymore. You're trying to change the government. And changing the government of a nation of 88 million people who are now unified by grief and rage is not something that happens from the air. It has never happened from the air. Every war planner in history who thought it could be done from the air was wrong. But you order the strikes anyway, because 41 people died on a Tuesday and 17 of them were children. And there is no longer a version of restraint that the Israeli public will accept. That's how it works. That's how every escalation in history has worked. Not because the leaders are stupid, not because the war planners didn't model this, but because events move faster than models and grief moves faster than strategy. And somewhere in the space between what was planned and what actually happened, the war you were trying to prevent becomes the war you're now trying to survive. You're back in that bunker, the recycled air, the old coffee, the 214 simulations that got you here. The screens are still on, the targeting coordinates are still loaded, but the document you're looking at now isn't the strike plan. It's the casualty projection for the next 90 days. You read the numbers, you close the document, you open it again. The numbers don't change. Somewhere in a bunker under Tehran, someone is looking at the same numbers from the other side. They closed their document too. They opened it again. The numbers didn't change for them either. That's where we are. That's where it always ends up. Not with monsters making monstrous choices. With people, trained and capable, and genuinely trying to protect something real, making the only choices the situation they built together, across decades of failures and miscalculations and near misses, left available to them. The clock is running. Nobody agrees on how much time is left. And the next decision, whoever makes it, wherever it's made, gets made in a room that smells like recycled oxygen and old coffee, by someone who has run the simulation more times than they can count, who knows exactly what the numbers say, and who makes the call anyway. Because someone has to. And in that room, in that moment, they believe they can do it better than whoever comes next. That's always the belief. That's always been the belief. And it's always been the beginning.